Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I am your host, Niti, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here on North Carolina. If you missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. We are a people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel, and we are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you. We are sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self govern. If you have any questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I'm joined on air with Greg Clarkson, regenerative farmer and ASN on Kansas. Now, I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Hey, everybody, and welcome back, Gregory.
Thank you.
We've been missing you. I know you've been dealing with winter.
Winter and animals and farming. So, yep, gotta love it. I'm ready for spring.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, we'll just dive right into it because Anna, we have lots of stuff to go over today. So today, Anna, I hope that you could talk about the patriots versus loyalists. There used to be a third group known as the neutral, but today they look different. They're the politically correct line walkers who just kind of wait to see. They think they just want to run with the winners, but they can't win for losing because we already know that, when you make no choice, that's immoral, and it's as immoral as all the lies, right? But they are not the same silent majority of the radically self-reliant people who needed nothing like during our forefathers' time. At this point, they're the ones who need everything, and they are drenched in so many lies that they can no longer decipher the truth. They need to start collecting skills like baseball cards, and soon they could learn the truth from the lies. Or they could perish for the ignorance, and ignoring the truth, that is actually within their grasp. And a lot of folks they really believe the theatrical performance that the corporatocracy put on, where they said, you can't handle the truth, a lot of folks just unfortunately believe that. And I believe they can handle the truth. And I think you do too, Anna, right?
I think that's a ridiculous excuse for not dealing with reality, and a dangerous excuse for not dealing with the reality. I mean, just because a freight train is uncomfortably close and coming down the tracks, it doesn't change the facts, right? So.
Right. And so what do we do? We got folks here who think that you haven't really thought even about going to talk on Joe Rogan yet, but obviously, you would have thought about letting people see you and know you. I don't think you're hiding under a rock.
No, I've always been very open to invitations to go talk to people. Sure. And I've been on a lot of different shows. I've been on the Sergeant Report. I've been on Sarah Westall. I've done all sorts of different things over time. I've been on Coast to Coast. I've done many interviews. So it's not like I haven't been out there doing my job.
Right.
It's that. Well, the amount of information that I have to share and the kind of technical details of what I can share is overwhelming for most people. I mean, it's a lot. And there's a logic to it. And once you click into the logic of it, you see it. But it's like Terry says, once you see it, you can't unsee it. But until you see it, it's like looking at a Rorschach blot test, Do you see the two women or do you see the dog? And, you're looking at the same thing, but because your perception is attuned in a different way, you're only seeing the dog, or you're only seeing the two women. You're not seeing the whole picture.
Or the ink blot. You might just be seeing the ink blot.
Yeah, there's a black blot there, boy. But anyway, this is the kind of thing it is where once people see it, then it's easy. But until they do, it's hard. And, I've been talking to some of these guys for 20 years. Just recently, I've had contacts from a lot of people that are struggling to understand some particular part of it. Like there's a guy in Oregon, Ron Woerman, who is he's a fine guy. He's an old Marine. He's 100% American and 100% Oregonian. And but there are just a few little things that he doesn't get. And so this past week we've been discussing the concept of federation and confederation and how those two things fit together, and the fact that there's an actual confederation that worked and there's a confederation that didn't work. And for lack of a better explanation or way to explain it, there's a first confederation and a second confederation. And the first one is the perpetual union between land and soil, which is a natural confederation and a perpetual union that can't be broken for practical natural law reasons, right? And they tried to create a second confederacy between the land and soil and the air. But you cannot guarantee a perpetual union of business entities because there's nothing there in natural law that holds them together.
Or water gets in between.
And people are, people are notoriously changeable, so the wind blows down the street and cotton prices are low this year, and suddenly there's a whole new dynamic. So, they were trying to guarantee a perpetual union with it that they couldn't logically guarantee. And so, natural law was not there to support them in this endeavor.
Is it because of the water, Anna, or am I wrong about that?
Well, it's because human nature and the conditions of trade and commerce are continually changing. Whereas the bond between land and soil is eternal. It's never going to be different than it is. And so when you try to do something, when you try to bind yourself to, say, a contract that you really can't logically bind yourself to, it's a kind of a default position from the beginning. You see,
well, it's either aerobic or anaerobic, and land and soil can operate in both. And this airy-fairy stuff doesn't work in both. Either they're going to drown or they're going to, drown in the air, right? Drown in the air or drown in the water.
Well, they just can't. You can't guarantee some things, And someone pointed out that marriage is like that. I mean, you can you can raise your hand and you can swear to it, but whether you actually succeed or not is another different matter, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of honor involved. You got to fight for it, and you got to honor each other.
It seems like it takes a lot of work to make something like a marriage or like the air and the land come together. You got to want to make it happen.
You have to care.
Land and soil is just naturally bonded. It doesn't take a lot of work to keep that intact.
Right. Exactly. There's the difference between the natural circumstance, which is guaranteed by nature,
right,
and the kind of commitment that it takes to stay together in a marriage.
31 years tomorrow for me. Tomorrow's our anniversary.
Congratulations. Yay.
So I know what you mean. It does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to choose it every single day, and you have
Yep.
to find a reason, and the land and the soil doesn't have to have any reason to be separate.
That's true.
Right. So
Yep.
you see, it's a different kind of thing. And while you can talk about a perpetual union of the land and soil and be sure of it, it's going to be there tomorrow the same way it's there today. You can't do that with a marriage. You can't
Right.
do that with a business partnership.
Well, you can. It just won't last long.
It'll die sooner or later.
Well, they lasted for what? From basically 80 years.
That's true.
Yeah.
They had a good long run at it, but they ultimately fell apart on the issue of cotton. So,
Well, the land and soil isn't going to die. And it's always, you can always revive it. And then the thing that's really powerful that people don't even know is like even the ancient seedbed can come back with massaging the soil. I mean, as the regenerative farmers know, you don't even have to plant a seed. You can just run livestock over it, and the magnetic energy of the livestock will revive the ancient seedbed, as we have been able to show on many land parcels. And I mean, they're doing that on Tasmania right now, because Tasmania was ruined, and they've actually, Alan Savory has proven this in deserts, because he has converted completely desertified areas, and livestock has been able to bring it back to life, and even start building soil on the land again. So this isn't magic, it is magnetism.
well, it is magic. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, that's pretty magical. I think the magnetism is magical, but it is the life force, the life-giving force that is massaging the land and the soil that brings, with magnetism and attraction, this brings it back to the law of attraction.
But that seedbed, like you're talking, is just a natural seedbed. It's naturally here. It was meant to be here. It was here since,
the
eternity.
beginning of time.
Yeah, exactly. And you couldn't do that with a seed that wasn't meant to be here. It just wouldn't work.
Right. These people are so worried about the seeds and collecting and saving them. This is a corporatocracy trick. And we don't have to do that, because God has already taken care of that.
Yep.
Well, explain a little bit, because I'm sure that your viewers are not necessarily into permaculture and into all of the different kinds of farming that there are, and yet it's very interesting and it's a very important topic, because even if you're not a farmer, you're dependent upon farmers.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Gregory, what your grasp of it is, because I lean heavily on like Joel Salatin and Alan Savory, who definitely are more expert than I am on the subject.
Well, Kansas, for example, was famous for the bison roaming through here, the huge ruminant animals. And so there was a reason for that. We've since tilled the soil. And I've often said, and I'm one of them that does it now, but we probably should have never broke ground here. It should have been pasture. It should have been grazing land. So that seed bed that's there is the old, what the old timers would call the old native grasses.
Yes.
Big blue stem, little blue stem. There's very few patches of ground in Kansas that have never been tilled. There's actually one just a few miles from me. Never had a plow put into it. And that's just your native grasses growing there. But I've got some areas that I've just set aside, and just like Niti said, those old native grasses have reemerged. I didn't plant them. I didn't fertilize them. Nature just reemerged, so I think it's just naturally what's here.
Yeah, without interference.
Without interference. We'll grow certain trees here. If I want blueberries, then I'm out of luck, because we're probably not going to have natural blueberries at least in my area. But we sure will have a lot of other, mulberry trees. dewberries,
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you just just let nature go. You can
Right.
take some of these fields where nobody does anything to them.
Mhm.
And around here, it's what we call Osage orange trees or hedge trees, cedar trees, your native grasses, and they'll just take over and they'll make it a jungle. It may
Mhm.
not be what you want, but you
Mhm.
don't have to do anything. So those seeds were there,
Mhm.
or they, or they migrate in birds and
Mhm.
wind and all that. But
Mhm.
effectively, the seeds were there.
Mhm.
So, neither you've mentioned it before, you're kind of battling nature to do what you want if you're doing something different than what was meant here.
But you
Meant to,
could dance with nature. And so when
yeah,
the correct husbandry comes in, Anna, like he's saying, it creates a jungle or a forest, okay, in our
yeah,
circumstance. So it'll create a jungle or a forest in those natural circumstances, just being massaged by the animals, okay, the life-giving force that walks on top
yep,
and that massages the soil and massages or if the soil bed has been washed away like it was during the dust bowl, or even in these desertified areas, then magically if you run, pressured livestock in areas, you can start massaging it back in, like from the perimeter, and you can bring it back. And we can take Nevada, for example, that is 100% desertified, and we can bring it back to life. And we know how to do it. And I mean, there's plenty of us who are still alive, who they haven't been able to kill off, that we know how to do it. And it's that natural pressure, but you have to allow it to have stress and rest and stress and rest and pressure and rest. And that's why you rotate the livestock. That was the purpose of the miles long and the miles wide migratory patterns that naturally occurred. And it
yeah,
went with the seasons. They were following the water, the temperatures, whatever the migratory reasons were. Then those specific animals were moving in certain areas for working the areas at that time. So when the birds flew south, they needed to do that for a reason. Then they flew back north for a reason. Everything has some mission that they're trying to complete. So
yeah. And
closing that hoop.
it's amazing. Like the buffalo would move. They were mob grazing. They didn't know what they were. They didn't know it was called that. But what I mean by that is the herd would move into an area. They would eat the grass down so far, but you can't eat it down to the ground because you got to have some amount of health of the grass there. And the buffalo naturally knew that, so they would move on to the next area and
Mm-hmm.
eat that down. And then, next season they would be back around to that area they just left, and it was just a beautiful synergistic effect. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, the hoof imprints, the peeing and the pooping on the land, just all of it worked.
Right.
Um, I dug
Until the fences went up.
Yeah, until the fences went up. Yeah.
Yep.
I dug a hole over by a pond or an area over by the pond. I was trying to repair what we call a pond. I don't know what it's called in other parts of the country, and so I laid some soil up on the ground and then I left it basically. I had plants, or I would call them weeds, although a weed is just a plant that is something that's growing there that you don't want there. It's not a weed, it's a plant. But I had plants I hadn't seen since I was a kid. And there was that a great example. I dug some old seed up that had been there for however many years. And it just amazed me. It's like, where did that come from? Oh yeah, I took the soil and tipped it over. And I think that's what the ruminant animals do. Like you said, they're going to break up that little bit of top layer and whatever it is, oxygenate, expose, whatever. There's a lot of the magnetism. There's a lot of things that happen there, but nature's amazing, but it just takes time. We don't have the patience anymore.
Well, here in Alaska, we have what's called an Arctic rainforest. And it gets a lot of rain, and the soil is very arable. It's very loose and sandy in most part. I mean, we do have some areas where it's not, but for the most part, it's basically Arctic gravel. That's not that rich. Isn't that? It's not old soil. It's very new soil, and so the rain hits and it just washes all of the nutrients down into the subsoil. And it's very, very difficult for us to build up a really good garden tilth of,
Yeah.
you know, um, the various humus and all the microbes and stuff that really make a good garden.
Trees would help that, Anna. So the trees help to hold with their root systems. It would
Structure.
help, and it would give it the infrastructure that it needs. And so fruit trees do great in those areas. And then you mix in livestock with the fruit trees. So the fruit trees are thriving because they'll do great with that sandy uh, areas that you're talking about, because the water flow is fantastic for it. And then they'll rebuild the infrastructure, the trees will, and they'll have little saplings that will create forests everywhere. When you run hogs through there with it and put birds through there with the hogs, then they will turn that into a magic wonderland. And it's incredible how they will make soil. But,
Well,
it just needs pressure over time when you just leave it alone like that.
well, what we discovered is that we have the same kind of problem on the opposite side of the equator. You know how the north and the south are
Mm-hmm.
kind of balanced against each other. So
Yes.
you find the same exact conditions in southern South America, like
Mhm.
Patagonia.
Yes.
And anyway, so we found out that the ancient, prehistoric South Americans discovered a way of dealing with this.
Hmm.
And what they did is they took hardwood charcoal and beat it into a powder, and then they put that out on the land
Yep.
and mixed it into the soil, and that charcoal forms a matrix that
Yep.
holds the nutrients in the soil,
Sure.
and suddenly you've got arable, very fertile farmland, and you don't have to bust your butt continually adding new fertilizer to it every year.
The
Biochar.
burning, the biochar. Yeah, that was why the
Biochar.
Native Americans were doing the fires. So
Yep.
they used to do controlled burns in the same regard
Yep.
because it would produce the biochar.
So we have an area here called the Flint Hills, and it's where the glaciers came down to a certain point, and the Native Americans did that. They would burn off the grasslands every year, and it's exactly, well, I mean, very similar to what you're describing, similar reasoning. And it looks so foreign to people to see. It's like, why are they lighting the pasture on fire?
Yeah.
And I just grew up with it. You just get used to it. But yeah, every year, that's a part of kind of the ritual, I guess, is you go out and burn the pasture, literally.
Well, and that helps keep the soil alive and thriving.
It
Yeah.
does.
Realize it. Another thing that helps is adding soil microbes and mushroom mycelium to the soil.
Yep.
Because if you can get a good, mushroom and microbiome going,
Yeah.
then that just helps that much more.
The
Well,
old
the
timers
fungus.
here. Whoop, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that
Go ahead.
the fungus creates that internet.
Yep.
Underneath. And we want everyone to comprehend that death is life.
Yep.
You have to have that death, that burn it creates more life. So I yield to you, Gregory. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say a similar thing. The old timers here said a good way to tell if you have good soil is just take what my granddad always called a sharpshooter, the narrow shovel, stick it in the ground and flip it over. And if you don't see an earthworm, you got horrible soil, because the earthworm is coming up to the surface and grabbing whatever bug carcasses, whatever it is, and then taking that down, eating that, excreting out. That feeds, the next one down, and it creates that enzymatic effect like you're describing. And for us, the earthworm is just vital here. So if you can take a shovel full and flip it over and count a dozen earthworms, you got some of the best soil you can have in our area. And I think that's the case in probably a lot of our country.
Everywhere.
I'm just familiar with it here.
It,
Everywhere without the worm situation. But you know, Anna, that sandy land that you're talking about, we have some sand hills here, and that's very valuable as well. And I'm telling you, fruit trees, I mean, everything has a different purpose. So the nuts and the fruit trees grow the best in the sand hills, and they need all that water flow constantly in that
Hmm.
way. But when you start running hogs and chickens through there with it, and ducks and geese, and then these random birds just start showing up from everywhere,
Hmm.
and they do this incredible dance. Those dinosaurs know them. Those birds are dinosaurs, you know, they know, and they know exactly what to do. And then all the rest of the ecosystem starts falling into place, and the it's incredible. You know, you're talking about the earthworms, Greg. I mean, the other
Oh yeah.
you know, life that's beneath the soil that comes around is just phenomenal, you know.
Yep.
And where does this stuff come from? I mean, nature is so magical. It's like,
So several years ago, over 10 years ago now, probably, I did one of the first what we call cover crops on one of the fields where I put a multi-species in of about 12 different plants. And the whole purpose was plant it, let it go, let it grow, and then let it die and fall back into the soil. And one way you can let it die is, or as it's dying, is you can come and plant another, or drill, as we would say, another crop in behind it, and you're just smooshing it down. Well, I did that, and I had the bucket on my tractor, and it was collecting all the heads of the various plants and stuff. And I stopped to go take a break, and I walked around the bucket, and the whole bucket looked like it was moving. And I got to looking, and I have a video. I'll have to send it to you both. But there must have been 1,000 different species of bugs, and I don't know, a million bugs in the bucket of this tractor. And it's, if you think about that, and then you go to what we would call a monocrop situation where you have one crop planted, you might find one or two different types of bugs, but it's going to be very, very limited. And so just that diversity of that bug population. And I agree. And somebody said, well, aren't you worried about that? And I said, well, I'm sure there's bad bugs, what we'd call bad bugs, but there sure were a lot of good bugs in there too. So they just had their own little community going on. And I'm hoping the good bugs took care of the bad bugs for me. But all those they're going to die. Like Niti said, they're going to die. They're going to fall back into the soil. The earthworms are going to come up and eat those carcasses. And it's just this cycle of life that you don't see. It's in the soil, right?
it's
There's the land and the soil connection there.
And it's so important what Greg's saying, that life that comes out. That's the reset that we've been looking for even here on North Carolina. And these doggone crazy chemicals, they're spraying like freaking nuts right now. It's unbelievable. But I will tell you what, Anna, I have watched here for the last 15 years. They have killed the fruits on the East Coast. So, like Carolina peaches, Georgia peaches, all these things have been killed because what did they do? These morons, they released geoengineered mosquitoes, like GMO mosquitoes in Florida 12, 13 years ago. And when they did that, they started spraying. And what they started was creating a disruption. What we need is 6 solid weeks of cold weather to reset the soil. And they disrupted it so that even if it was one whole day of warm, like one random 70-degree day in the midst of that 6-week, stint, it would reverse all the work that had been done for the weeks of cold that we received. And then it would not allow the mosquitoes and the other pests to cycle the way that they're supposed to. And so they created a mosquito problem. All of a sudden, now you got the corporatocracy going, oh, there's, Mosquito Joes and all these mosquito killing companies. We never had that when I was growing up. Also, we never had mosquito problems like this before. So this imbalance is due to the monoculture. It is because of the tapestry that we have enough. There's not good pests and bad pests. This is lies and bullshit sold to us by the corporatocracy. Just like good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Nonsense. You need cholesterol to live. Cholesterol is the, you know, the 911. When you call 911, you want the first responders to come. That is the cholesterol. Cholesterol comes and patches up all those holes that are being created by the stiffening of the arteries, when you are eating too much plant material and sugar and have the inflammation. When you have the inflammation, then what's happening is your mucus increases, right? When you have inflammation, because you have cracks and your body is trying to reline all these areas and protect it with extra mucus, and it's calling in all the cholesterol, and the cholesterol is coming to patch everything back up, like, oh my gosh. So your cholesterol goes up naturally to patch all this stuff up. And so if your cholesterol's up, that's because that's how you're going to live. These women that live to be 110 and 115 and 20 and they used to be living 300 and 400 years, used to be. But no, you can't do that anymore if you're trying to stop and interfere with the medicines, right? That's all medicine is doing, the fake pharmaceutical medicine. And so when people say, well, plants are medicine, and I'm like, right. So why are you eating it all the time? Why are you taking medicine every day? Are you sick all the time? What are you talking about?
Well, the other thing about it is too is you mess up your climate, because
Right.
it's just a cycle. So you start to monoculture, and you break down your bug population, and then that kills the earthworms because they don't have anything to eat. That kills the soil, and you're only growing at a certain time. So that eventually creates a climate issue. You once you start that process, it's not going to rain for a reason. It's a symbiotic relationship, and
Right.
I've seen it, on a very small scale. You can bring it back. That's part of bringing back Nevada. That's part of bringing back the wherever it was you said, over off of Africa, Niti. That's part of the idea, is they're trying to create enough of that vegetation down there that will actually bring back the climate around it, and they'll start to get more rainfall.
Right. The
Uh,
browning of the earth. That's the browning of the earth. So they created this browning of the earth on purpose. And if they wouldn't have put the fences up, that would have been one of the ways that they could have avoided that, you know.
True.
But everything goes back to land grabs, Anna. Everything goes back to
Yeah.
land grabs.
Well,
And it's for the power. It's for the power, and it's for the idolatry that you talk about.
Saudi Arabia has begun a very, very ambitious agricultural program to grow its own food. I mean, and if you, have you ever seen the movie Salmon Fishing on the Yemen?
No.
Oh my gosh, that's a wonderful movie,
Okay.
and it's about this sheik who uh, wants to bring renewal to his country,
Huh.
and is willing to put money into the land and soil to, create an environment where salmon can flourish in this very desert area.
Hmm.
And so he brings in all of these experts, and they're all kind of shaking their heads, right? Because salmon is a cold water fish,
Mhm.
and they're trying to adapt the local conditions to an environment that will support salmon. Well, when they start supporting salmon, of course, then the salmon begin making the water fertile, and the water then is making the land fertile, and the whole thing starts to work. And so, yeah, by all means, watch Salmon Fishing on the Yemen.
I have to check that out. I mean,
Yeah.
but they could just do the buffalo. So this is the part where it's like, they're working too hard. So the corporatocracy is constantly working too hard. You really want to know how to do this really well. You know who really taught us a lot is the Israelis. So the Israelis had their backs up against a wall, and they really know how to manage water. And they know how to do that working with the buffalo, or, cows, or any type of, you need the large, mammoths, all these, the large ruminants were the ones who actually, and this is what Look, how did Alan Savory learn this? Because he was in the military in South Africa and was in charge of killing all these elephants. And during that process, he learned a very important thing. And when he discovered the harm he was causing, he had to make it right. And people try to hold that against him even to this day, Anna. But when you're an order follower and you finally wake up to the fact that you were order following, right? And you're like, "Oh my gosh, that was causing so much harm." So then he spent the rest of his life, and he's still alive. He has dedicated his entire rest of his life to making it right. But he realized that their pressure was required and that what he was doing was causing the browning of Africa.
Right. Well, and Joe Salatin, is that
Joel
his name?
Salatin,
Joel Salatin.
yes.
He's now part of Trump's new agricultural initiative. He'll be having a big word on how agriculture is done in this country from now on.
Well, hopefully, because he was supposed to be coming in as the advisor for Thomas Massey, who's another great congressman who is off grid and a good friend of mine. And but I don't know that that's fully set. I mean, I really hope it is fixed, but I'm not sure that it is. And I know that's a partnership. It was supposed to be Thomas Massey with Joel Salatin, so I'm hoping that pair makes it. So
yeah, and they need to.
Yeah, I really hope they do. And they're together with Bobby Kennedy. So all of those guys are, they're part of the people that we've been working with. And Anna, what's so exciting to me about it is I see what you're working on. I see what they're working on. Remember, we're all bringing the circle. We're all trying to close the hoop, and they're coming at it this way and you're coming at it this way. And, it's such a big boon. It's such a big boon, and it's super exciting because it's very hopeful that they are starting. I mean, when I was hearing that, on the one hand, I'm like, who cares about the corporate elections? But, on the other hand, I was like, oh, but they're getting better. It's getting good.
Well, it's kind of like, Anna, you talk about, why do we have this concept of money? There's plenty of everything, out there. Same thing with food. They've created a food scarcity by doing everything wrong on purpose. There's no reason food should be scarce. No reason whatsoever. Just bring back some of these techniques, and there'll be more food than you know what to do with. So
Correct. There's always somebody's hand in the way. There's always some man's hand in the way.
Yeah,
they want it to be scarce so they can control it. We all know that.
Well, what we want to do is bring back natural balance.
Yes.
Yeah. And you notice, I don't know about you guys, but I'm just sitting here this morning thinking about these things, and it makes you feel younger than springtime, because
it's easy, right? When you love it, it's easy because all it requires is love and admiration. You just appreciate nature, and it just grows.
Well, and the thing is that when nature's in balance, we're in balance because we're part of nature. And so it makes all the difference in the world in terms of our mental and emotional and spiritual health to be in an environment which is in balance and healthy. And so when we do this for nature, nature pays us back in more ways than one. It's not just a matter of getting food. It's a matter of getting other forms of sustenance that are less material. It's the smell. It's the quality of the air going into your lungs. It's how much oxygen you get. It's there are all sorts of other things that
when you go to sleep, I tell my wife, we get into the winter months, the sun goes down earlier. I go to sleep earlier. I do as the sun does.
Right. And I know that as a kid growing up in Wisconsin, we always used to rotate the fields, and the cows would be here 1 year, and then the next year they'd move on to another pasturage, And, we would plant cover crops. You'd have alfalfa one year, you'd have winter rye the next, it would just, there was this eternal cycling of nutrients back into the ground. And on the seventh year, the land lay fallow and it did nothing. It just sat there and went, and so, and there were woodlots. We always preserved woodlots and hedgerows, so that there was this constant shuttling of life and animals and birds. And so that kind of farming creates life. And life creates more life. I mean, it's like planting carrot seeds. I mean, if you pay attention and promote life, then life continues to generate.
Yeah, well, this is what we mean. The death begets life. The corporatocracy would like to villainize death and say, well, you're creating all this death. Well, you're causing all of this death. You should be really careful about what you're doing. Well, no, there's a season. It's called fall. It is the season for the death. And that begets the new life. You can't have new life without the death. It is part of the cycle. And is there any actual death? No, because we're all electrical beings, And so can you stop electricity? Or is that energy constantly flowing? So at some moment, you have to realize there's no death. There's just this regeneration. And so that is the corporate mindset that they are instilling in us this, and this is how they control the fear, right, Anna? They fear monger you using death. This is all lies and immorality, because we know that we can't create more life in the soil without the burning, without some of the death, without, offering the bodies. Right,
well,
Gregory?
their whole premise is death, right? That's a corporation or a corpse. Their whole premise is death.
Right.
And well, there's an illogic to them, though. There's,
right.
They don't see the cycle. They don't care.
Care is the missing one. So care is required to regenerate, and that is a natural law. Care. That's the action principle to care.
And someone sent me this wonderful explanation of Cain being cursed. The Cain was cursed for his murder of his brother, so that the earth would no longer bear its fruits for him. So he had to go out and find other ways of making a living and existing on the planet. And as a result, the sons of Cain built cities, whereas the sons of Abel and the rest of Eve's children all built farms and stayed out in the country. So, I think it's very interesting that there's a life cult and there's a death cult.
Yeah.
And one is rooted in reality, in what you can hold in your hand and see with your eyes, and the other is off here in airy fairyland, creating all of these things that don't really exist, which are in effect lies. Okay, so the father of all lies conceived on this planet, and here we have all these people that deal in nothing but legal fictions.
Yeah.
It makes sense. The whole story holds together from front to back and top to bottom. But as for me, I love farming and I love agriculture when it's done right,
Yes.
And so this is very exciting for me that we're bringing back these principles and we're beginning to apply them, and the results are staggering.
Yeah.
Many years ago now, I visited a farm that produces a huge abundance of fruits and vegetables, basically a 40-acre truck farm that's managed using biodynamic principles such as, which were taught by Rudolf Steiner.
Mm-hmm.
And that 140-acre plot produces so much fruit and so much, so many vegetables that it can feed an entire metropolitan area.
Right. And imagine if there were livestock there and if they could move through it, then they would carry that and it would be even a greater area.
But
And
that's just 40 acres. Can you imagine
right.
if you had 4,000 acres? Like I said, there's no reason for a shortage of food.
No, it's the fences. It's the men who choose. We all get to choose. And that brings us back to how we started this conversation. So I was asking you about, the patriots versus the what do you call them? The
Loyalists?
yeah, the Tories.
Tories,
The Tories, yeah, the loyalists. That was the word I was looking for. So so Anna, I feel like, these groups aren't things that people know about in today society. And even on all the assemblies, like we're observing, there are still people who are loyalists who don't realize they are because they don't know who they are, right? Because none of us have actually ever been knowing who we are because they've been lying to us for all these years. And so on some level, they are the loyalists, but they don't know that because they don't know it. They don't realize it. And in fact, it's incredible. Like you brought the Tories up. And I mean, like, of course, now we can't unhear or unsee anything because you've made it so plain. And I mean, for me, every time you say something, I'm like, dang, okay, yeah, obviously. But then everybody else who I'm talking to are so much further on the other side. It's so crazy. But can you please speak on that today? I mean, are you observing this too? Because I don't know. I feel like you've known it for so long, and we're still the boots on the ground that I don't know if you can even see it anymore because you're kind of so far from that, like you have to be obviously for what you're doing, but we're realizing it as we're observing, the others, and we're like going, oh my gosh, that person over there really thinks that they're an American, but what they're doing is actually what the loyalists were doing, but they just don't even see it. And we don't want to tell them that they are, but John Adams and Sam Adams would have went and marked their door.
Right. Well, I saw this wonderful post on X, and it said, here is a one sentence that will answer all your questions about any of the weird things that have happened in history. And here's the one sentence. The government is behind it, and they're lying to you to cover it up. Okay? And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, you're having thoughts about 9/11. The government is behind it, and they're lying to you about it to cover it up. ETs, the government is behind it. They're lying to you to cover it up. The atom bomb, the government is behind it, and they're lying to you to cover it up. If you just have that one thought, that's going to answer all your problems and all your questions. It's just going to be this one size fits all across the whole spectrum of weird crap that goes on. The drones in New Jersey, the government is behind it
to cover it up. I mean, and the same thing with nature. Like nature has your back, but the government is behind the interference, and they're lying to you to cover it up.
Right. The chemtrails, the government's behind it. They're lying to you. I mean, it's an all-purpose purpose little mantra. You can just take it to the bank and use it, and it's going to be
Mhm.
true. Okay. And
Right.
so, there's that. And I wanted to share that because I got to thinking about it. Yeah, that is an all-purpose, little.
Yeah. So then how do we identify how do we talk about this? Because this is an important conversation that we have to have, like, as we're working with everybody on assemblies is, um, I don't know. This is an important conversation because all of us are just figuring things out and we're all just discovering it. And, you know, there's certain people that just aren't interested in, making this progress happen. And I don't know
Well,
that they're doing it. I don't think they might be, maybe, are they subconsciously doing that? I don't really get it because there's
well,
so much brainwashing too. So I was like,
Yeah.
what you start bumping into is called cognitive dissonance.
mm-hmm,
And, this is a process by which you don't have a framework to take in the information you're getting.
mm,
And so what happens, it's like a pinball. The first time the information hits your brain pan, it bounces off.
mm-hmm,
It's because there's a resistance to it because there's no place for it to fit inside your head. Okay. It's like it's a piece of extraneous information and bang, okay, it is registered and yet it bounces off. And you'll even have a hard time remembering it. Now, the second time it hits your brain pan, you'll remember, oh yeah, there was this other time that this other point source that yeah, I recognize that hit before. And after a couple, two, three times of getting the same kind of ping, then it begins to be important enough for you to focus on it and add it into your matrix of thought, right?
mm-hmm.
But up until that point, until it's hit you two, three times and you're actually forced to look at it, it just bounces off like a pinball, bouncing, like a couple of steel ball bearings going bing. And that people learn different things at different rates
Sure.
because of how much information is impinging, how many pings they're getting, and also what kind of information it is. For example, it takes us 10 times, we have to eat new food 10 times before our whole body recognizes it and knows that it's food. Now,
Hmm.
that's kind of crazy, but when you're dealing with a fussy baby that doesn't like to eat food, that's what's going on. They're taking
Hmm.
that 10 times of, okay, I have to eat a hot dog 10 times before I recognize it as food.
Do
I
you
have
think so, or is that for the corporatocracy's fake chemistry project stuff? Because I have not had that experience with raw eggs or beef or something like that with the babies because they love it. And liver, the babies love it. But
yeah,
when you try to give them a goldfish cracker or McDonald's, they don't I remember my sons and daughters didn't take to McDonald's until you went there a few times, but they sure did take for the beef or the potatoes or something that was, at home that came out of the garden or something. So I don't know about that, but like, and what about these folks, Anna, that I think there is some cognitive dissonance for a little while, but that at the end of the day, we all still get to choose.
yeah.
And there's just some folks that choose love, and there's some folks that are just going to choose evil. And it's easier for some folks. Some people are just like, this is so hard. This is so hard because no one believes me about this being real. Like, no one believes that this is real because it's not on television, right? It's not in the movies. I mean, it is and it's not. It is and it's not, right?
Well, the thing is that, as for a motivation, you
Mm,
can't ever really feel secure until you know what's going on.
mm,
Until everything is logical and you can see, A and B and C and it all follows together and it
mhm.
makes sense. And I think part of what kept me going for so long was just the sense that I didn't know what was going on around me. I couldn't
Right.
make sense of what I was seeing. I mean, here I am in the land of the free, and I'm being persecuted by the IRS for federal income that I don't have. Hello? I know that I don't get a check from Uncle Sam, thank you. So, I have no federal income. Why are
Right.
you bothering me? You
Right.
know? So there were things always in the environment that I was growing up in that did not make sense.
Sure.
And so that's what set me off on the long journey of figuring out how did we get here and what does this mean?
Hmm. But then
And
even when they
what
see that and then they're like, okay, like we just said, there's the people that are like, okay, yes, I get it. Oh my gosh. And then there's the people that say, yeah, I get it, but I'll just wait over here until you show me the money, for example,
Well, it
right?
takes work, though, right? It takes work. It takes effort. It
Right.
takes learning. You know,
Right.
a lot of people don't want to work at anything. They just want it handed
Right.
to them.
Right, which is immoral, right? Because they're ignoring
And
the
boring,
truth.
in my opinion. Why would you want to live like that? That'd be
Right.
boring.
When you're ignoring the truth, that is ignorance on its
Yeah,
face, okay?
yeah.
So, you can't keep ignoring, like, we're talking about the people, Anna, who there can't keep ignoring it, all right? And then there's the ones that are even beyond that, that are just like, "No, I'm still want the money," you know? And
even
so
if you have the money, that's not really it. What you really need is a view of reality that works. And they're
we
dealing,
agree, yeah.
you know, they're dealing with a reality that doesn't make sense. They're dealing with chaos because, what they're getting is lies that
Mhm.
directly contradict experience.
But
I
they're
mean,
profiteering on it, Anna, so that's what we're trying to tell you, is the ones that choose the money like that are the ones who are profiteering on it, and then there's most of us who aren't, because the majority obviously is not, right? And so, most of us aren't, and so once you actually come home, that's what I'm saying. We have the patriots, we have the loyalists, and then we have the middle of the road that are waiting, right? But they're not like our forefathers, undecided ones who actually were radically self-reliant. They would just go be radically self-reliant somewhere, right? These people actually need something all the time because that they haven't been trained with skills, right? So that puts them in a different middle. And so you end up with these things. That's what's messing up all the assemblies. That's the problem. So, what can we do to fix it? What can we do to start this conversation? Because it needs to be addressed too.
well, the revolution was fought and won by only about 10% of the population.
Right.
And only about 10% of the population are needed to do any major change. So we don't really have to worry about trying to convert 90% of the people.
Mm.
Most of the people are just going to follow along. They're going to learn what they're going to learn. They're going to live what they're going to live. But what we can offer them
Hmm.
is sanity.
Right.
You
So then,
know,
what's the best way to say, hey, friend, I think you belong over on the district assembly?
you just say that. You know, you know. There's really nothing so bad about that. I mean, it's like, okay, you have a choice. You can be an Englishman living in this country, or you can be a American living in this country. It's your choice. You don't really have to make any big deal of it. You just have to find the right slot. I mean, it's like that old saying, the right church, but the wrong pew. Okay, we're all here in America, right?
Right.
Uh, but the Americans sit on this side and the English sit on that side. And, um, there are provisions, there are treaties, there are laws that make this clear, that make it obvious and easy to live with. So make use of them. When you get someone in your assembly who obviously is, into the British subject mentality,
Hmm.
um, they belong in a district assembly. Okay, it's not a sin to be a member of a district assembly. In fact, if you've got the right mentality for it, you can add to keeping those district assemblies in line and keeping everybody in a peaceable state of cohabitation and coexistence. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
so if you've got somebody who's awake enough to realize that they have an American heritage that is valuable, and yet they just endemically have this subject mentality where they want someone to tell them what to do and when to do it, then send them to the district assembly. They'll be happier and you will be happier because they won't be constantly interfering with what you need to do.
Hmm.
And so, same thing with municipal assemblies. We when in Pennsylvania we had a guy who just could not understand that this was not a religious institution.
Yeah.
We're not part of the theocracy. We don't pray every other moment we don't have prayer groups associated with our assemblies, because it's a government. It's not a religious institution. It has to, accept and deal with people from a wide variety of different religions, and so we're not a theocracy.
Yeah.
We have a separation between church and state, and he could not get that to save himself, and he was constantly upset because he was so centered on the idea that the government had to be a theocracy. It just had to be. And when he finally understood that that was a municipal government thing, they're a theocracy. Oh, well, then he could go to the municipal district assembly and be right at home. And so, it's no sin if you want to live in a theocracy. Well, there you are. You've got the Holy Roman Empire right at your back door. So, walk across the street, join the municipal assembly, and goodbye and God bless you. Goodbye. We're doing something different here. And so, um, recognizing those things uh, and getting people into their own sphere where they're comfortable and where they're doing what they believe in, and by all means, it's like you've got turkeys, you got ducks, and you've got chickens. You just
Mhm.
kind of funnel them into their group, and it's because we're the ones that are aware. We're the ones that get stuck with the poultry herding duty.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
It's not easy. The education is difficult. It is exhausting. Anna, you've been doing it for so many years with us, and we appreciate you so much. I've been doing this too for 15 years. I mean, people who have worked here on the food church said it's the hardest job they've ever had. And when I ask them what's the hardest thing, they're like, I feel like I just repeat myself all day long. And I'm like, yeah, they're like, they still don't know how to cook the short ribs. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, I know, every day, every day. So, I mean, we praise you to the highest for constantly putting up with us, asking you the questions 15 different ways. Thank you for your patience and your love. I mean, it is so powerful, and we appreciate it so much. And look, we didn't get to all the questions, friends, but there was a lot of information in this podcast, and I hope that you realize what you're learning here. And Greg, thank you so much for contributing towards that, because it was really good. And we will see next week, Anna.
Mm,
Next Tuesday is Christmas Eve.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
What would you like to do?
I think we should cancel.
All right, let's have a break next week.
Let's have a break. Let's,
All right.
get down and enjoy the holiday with our families, not worry about work, not worry about anything, just enjoy being. Okay.
Yes.
And, make that our mission to enjoy being in the heart of the holiday season.
We
And
should.
and really, um, this this has been very good. I mean, we did go over some important things. Um, I just wanted to share a bit of information that I think could help a lot of people.
Yeah.
We all know that as men get older, they tend to have an enlarged prostate problem. A lot of men, something like 80% of all men, will at some point suffer an enlarged prostate.
Hmm.
And that little gland seizes up around the urethra and makes it difficult for them to urinate, which causes all sorts of other problems. It can cause kidney failure. It can cause, bladder retention. All sorts of things can happen that are not good and that really interfere with the quality of life. One of which is a broken sleep. They have to get up and go to the bathroom, 6, 8 times a night. They just cannot get any rest. It's a terrible problem, and there's no real cure for it. The doctors do various kinds of surgery, but there's no good result. It's just one of those things that allopathic medicine has failed with a large F to deal with. Well, guess what? It turns out that there are parts of the world where this problem is virtually unknown. And I got a letter from a Polish great grandma like myself who shared the news that they take a tea made from the small flowered white willow, which is called Epilobium parviflorum, and that's an I, parviflorum. So Epilobium parviflorum. And so I got this. I dial up Amazon. There it is. I order. I get the herb. I make the tea, and it works. It works. And so Jim, my husband, who was suffering from BPH, benign hypertrophy of the prostate, started taking this tea 2 weeks ago, and he's peeing like a racehorse.
Good for him.
Well, you got to clear those kidneys, and
You do, and that's kind of it's one of those topics that it's not really something you want to talk about over breakfast. But on the other hand, when millions of men are needlessly suffering from this, then this is information that needs to get out into the community again. I say again because the Polish community never lost that particular little bit of information, and it can save millions of men from misery and nasty surgeries and all sorts of health issues.
mhm.
So
Also, like you guys have gone keto, that also helps. And then the other part of it is, used to be a long time ago, Anna, if you, they were maintaining liver and kidney health by eating liver weekly. They ate kidneys. It was, this was a done thing. And so when you eat liver and kidney, it actually helps support your liver and kidney. And so particularly from beef, and always doing that for years. Used to be, if you watched, what was that? Not Bob Newhart. I'm thinking of one of those shows, but I can't remember the name of it. They used to have liver, like even on the Brady Bunch, they'd have night. They'd have liver and onions once a week. So these were things that were staple foods that currently no one's eating because they're eating this fake, candied looking everything. Everything looks like fake candied looking whatever.
yeah.
So that also makes a big difference too. So,
Well, I can tell you from our experience that nothing helped, and this works.
nice.
Okay? And
Excellent.
you can order it from Amazon for about $16 and get a big bag.
That's what I was going to say, and the cost is nothing, basically.
Right. Perfect. That's
Wow.
wonderful. Well, everybody got that recorded, we can just rewind and play, and we
Yeah.
will check that out. And thank you so much, Anna.
I got
And
one last thing before we break. I want to give a shout out to Paul Strammer.
yeah,
I have the USB here with a lot of articles written by Anna on it.
nice.
And he threw in, and I'll have this hanging next time we talk. He threw in a flag as well.
Isn't Paul wonderful? I love Paul.
Wow.
Well, he actually gave me the CD and the flag because I bought the silver with him, and that's also a shout out to anybody looking to get physical silver. Just give Paul. Well, that's what paulstrammer.net. Just go there. You can get his contact details, and he's been wonderful to work with. Wonderful.
Lovely.
Yes. And yes, his little mint business is excellent. Really
Yes.
excellent. And you know, you could hardly find a better source in terms of service and
There's one of the divisible ones that you can get from Paul. It'll
Nice.
break into quarters basically, so I can have a quarter an ounce of silver.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And these guys have been working on this for many years. I mean, there are people in this country who realize the difference between paper and metal.
Yes. Yes.
Reality and not reality.
Yeah, there you go. Land.
Right.
And
like
air.
land. Yeah. Like land and air. Oh my gosh. Of course. Wow. Well, thank you, Anna, and Merry Christmas then. So, Chris, the next time we'll be on would be New Year's Eve.
I believe so.
All right,
And,
friends.
you know, I don't know about the rest of you, but New Year's is always kind of a good time for taking stock of the past year and looking forward to the next year. And you know, I think by then we'll be into the mindset of business and taking care of business and having our own sort of resolution for revolution. Okay.
Resolution for revolution. I love it. So that's a great topic. We'll see you guys on New Year's Eve, and we will be talking about our resolution for the revolution.
Okay. Well, onward. Take care, guys.
Thank you.